Hello everyone and welcome to the Medtech Ventures podcast, where innovation meets investment in the world of medical technology. I'm your host Craig Townsend, and I am delighted to be joined today by Kasper Sørensen, who is the CTO and co-founder at VentriJect. Kasper, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Craig. I'm doing fine, thank you. And how are you?
I'm really good, thanks. I'm excited to talk about today's product and today's solution. I am very much into my fitness. I'm an ultra marathon runner, and for years I've been looking for a gold standard in VO2 max testing. So before we get into the technology, Kasper, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, thank you so much, Craig. Yeah, so I'm a civil engineer of background. I studied engineering in, I think you would call it biomedical engineering. And after I was done with the studies, I was fortunate enough to be selected for a PhD study as well. So I started this PhD journey and started to investigate this the seismocardiogram. So the vibrations that are caused by the beating heart that we can capture and record on the chest. And one thing was to figure out, okay, what does this signal actually mean? It was, even though it's an old technology, it wasn't used a lot in the days. But another thing was then to figure out, okay, what can we use this signal for? And one of my supervisors had this idea that maybe you could actually figure out the fitness level of individuals just by recording on the chest and analyzing this seismocardiogram. So the hypothesis was maybe we can actually estimate VO2 max from this signal, and it turned out that we could. So that's how this, what actually started as the PhD project, then turned out to be a company that is now running on its own.
It's really interesting. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the founding then. It started as a PhD project. What led to the spin out then and the forming of a formal company? Were you working with a tech transfer office or talk to me about that journey?
Yeah, of course. So as I said, we did this initial pilot. So we did a lot of initial pilot studies to figure out, okay, can we actually estimate the VO2 max just based on this signal? And when we figured out that there was a very easy way to correlate some features from the seismocardiogram to the VO2 max, we were quite certain that, okay, we can actually make this into a business, and we should try to also spin it out of the university. So we actually did an approach where we fairly quickly established a company and then decided to say, okay, we'll found the company now, and then we'll have to deal with the university later to spin it out and make a nice agreement with them. Some of the co-founders, they were quite knowledgeable in the area of spin-outs, had some experience with that before, and said, okay, this time I think we should try to just found the company and then figure out the details down the road. And of course, that's one way to do it, right? So then after we founded the company, of course, went to the technical transfer office of Aalborg University, and they were happy to also collaborate with us and figure out a good way because of course the tech was discovered at the university, so they are part of they own part of the IP of this product. So we also needed to have an agreement with them about how can we use the IP. And they were happy to make an agreement with us.
That's good to know. A lot of tech transfer offices around the world get a bit of a tough rap as far as taking IP, taking equity, taking large-scale ownership of ideas that are created. And I understand, these are financed by the academic institution, so they've got to take some sort of stake. But it's good to know that there's a good, healthy relationship there.
Exactly, and I mean it is always a bit of a business, right? You also need to say, okay, maybe we can actually bring this tech longer than if we just keep it in the university. So it's a good negotiation, I think, an interesting one at least.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the technology side of things then. The gold standard for VO2 max, or measuring VO2 max, is what's known as CPET, right? It's cardiopulmonary exercise testing. Some of our listeners may have seen it in fitness documentaries or on TV or in movies. It's getting somebody exercising, doing threshold exercising with a mask. So the Seismofit, which is what VentriJect has developed, right? Yeah. Very, very different situation. And you talked a little bit about a different way of measuring VO2 max. So what can you tell us about the technology?
Yeah. So what we actually do with the Seismofit sensor is that you place this very small sensor on your chest. So it's just the size of a matchbox. It's no larger than this. It comes with a double adhesive stick that you place on the sensor and then onto your chest. And what we do is you lay down, relax, and then we record the seismocardiogram for 40 seconds. And that's how long a signal that we need to acquire to be able to have enough beats and a good enough quality of a signal to actually analyze in our model. Then we look up some fiducial points that we know, because we've done a lot of clinical studies, that are correlated to your VO2 max. We then have a mathematical model that we enter these fiducial points into, the different features of the seismocardiogram based on these fiducial points, and we then estimate your VO2 max. So it's a VO2 max estimation, so we are of course very close to the gold standard. But the thing is, here you don't need to exercise. You actually just need to lay down and relax for 40 seconds, and that's it. Then you have your VO2 max estimate.
So, given that VO2 max is still, it's been an indicator for years about cardiorespiratory fitness, but it's often been something reserved for the elite athletes amongst us, and it's always been an indicator of performance and progression. Given that the Seismofit is able to be done to anyone laying down, what sort of target market are you going for here? Is this an indicator that everybody should be testing for?
Yeah, I mean, of course, according to us, and ideally, yes, everyone should know their own VO2 max. I think when we founded the company, the use of VO2 max in general was a bit like less known. Not as many clinics used it, but then again, some companies doing like they would go out to companies and then do checkups of a whole company's staff. They would maybe use the CPET, or they would use like a step test or something in that realm. So they would know, okay, there is actually this VO2 max parameter, which is extremely important to know. I think just in the last, I would say 1.5, 2 years, the whole era of longevity and knowing your VO2 max is like expanding, and it's being more and more like publicly known that you should know your VO2 max. The American Heart Association published a scientific statement back in 2016 about the importance of knowing your VO2 max, also monitoring it, and that clinicians should maybe also actually monitor their patient's VO2 max, because it is such a good general indicator for your health and your well-being. So even like a small improvement in your VO2 max can actually have a significantly impact in how long you're going to live. So it is a very, I think, in my opinion, also in the opinion of the American Heart Association, a very good parameter to actually know.
So what with that in mind, the go-to-market strategy for this, are you hoping to still have the intended use of the Seismofit in a clinical setting? Does it have to be operated by an expert, or is there a future where a layperson is able to use this and take readings themselves?
Yeah. So what we're actually doing right now is to make it so that more or less everyone can just use our system. And we have designed it so that we have an app that will guide you through how to do the measurement. And so the app will be more or less an instruction for how to use the device as well. So as long as you're able to use your phone and lay still, I would say that everyone can actually use the product. And that also makes it very scalable and I would say accessible to most people who would use it. Right now we still see that we sell to, and our only markets is to companies. But in the future maybe, this is a product that everyone could own or could potentially buy, at least if you want to know your VO2 max. If you're maybe a sports athlete or someone who just likes the numbers of your own body health, then you could use it. But you could also have it as some people will buy a blood pressure monitor to have at home.
Yeah, it's an interesting segment there. Given the discourse and the conversation at the minute around regulation in at-home diagnostics and I guess towing the line between personal care and medical devices, where does the Seismofit fit on this regulatory journey?
Yeah, and that's a very good question that we have also asked ourselves many times. So the Seismofit is a medical device, and we founded the company in the era where in the EU, the Medical Device Directive was just about to be replaced by the regulation. So we were fortunately enough to place our product on the market just before MDR became effective. So the product right now is an MDD product, and we of course have a notified body that will help us and certify the product as an MDR class 2 product when we go to MDR. In the US, however, it's a different story. Our regulatory experts in the USA, they regard this product as a wellness device where you don't need all of the regulatory documentation. So our strategy is actually to go to the market in the US as a wellness device and then upscale down the line. So when we're finished with our transitioning period from MDD to MDR, we will start to approach the FDA to get FDA clearance. But then we have all of the technical documentation in place for going to the FDA approval as well.
It's a really interesting business strategy. I've spoken at length. I gave a talk at the Consumer Electronics Show this year on advising people only to seek certification when a commercial opportunity arises, instead of setting out with regulation first, especially for a product like the Seismofit. Get it into the market, start collecting feedback, start collecting data, which you can eventually roll in as part of a clinical submission for certification. Really interesting that you've been advised something similar, it sounds, in the USA, to get the product out there, get people using it, get that first set of feedback, and then use all of that great exposure and data to then seek certification down the line. I think that's a really solid business strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it also, just as you mentioned, like the whole bank of data that you will collect in this time span is extremely valuable for when you want to have regulatory affairs look into your bank of data. So it's a very good point.
So I'm really curious, slightly off topic, but on topic, given some of the conversations that I've been having with guests on this podcast recently. Let's talk about patient data quickly. The Seismofit has the potential to get mass adoption. You've said that it works for anyone, but ultimately you can use it in the comfort of your own home. I imagine it's affordable. You are collecting surely a great repository of cardiorespiratory data, right? What's the end goal for that data? What are you able to do with that? I imagine you're using that to train an AI in order to better predict early signs or cardiorespiratory fitness. Talk to me a little bit about the patient data.
Yeah, of course. So what we actually, and what we try to do, which may be a little bit backwards of what other companies are maybe doing right now, is that we try to limit the data that we actually collect.
Okay.
So we collect, of course, this seismocardiogram that we record with the sensor. We record age, height, weight, and sex of the subject being estimated. And that's actually it. So we use all of that data to enhance our signal processing models, especially with like signal cleanup, noise reduction, and stuff like that. But what we use to improve our algorithm is more based, or I would say only based, on clinical studies. So we have partnerships with a lot of both hospitals, but also universities, now I would actually say around the world, who collects data for us. So they will collect both the Seismofit estimation of VO2 max, and then they will do a real gold standard CPET. So that will be either on the bike or on a treadmill. And we will let them get that data. So we are able to get the estimated VO2 max from the Seismofit and the reference gold standard VO2 max. And we can use that data to optimize our algorithm. So that means whenever we actually do some updates to our algorithm, it's based on, I would say, very strong scientific and very clinical data, and not data that have been recorded from some of our regular customers.
That's a very, very healthy attitude, and I've mentioned this in a couple of episodes of this podcast, but given the current mistrust of medical device companies around patient data and curation of patient data, you build credibility through one honest, healthy, transparent touch point at a time. So it's very, very good to hear that VentriJect is taking the bare minimum in order to improve and optimize the product and give that back to the patient. So yeah, you should be commended on that. It's a nice,
for sure.
nice vision.
Thank you so much, Craig. And I think also this talks into one of kind of the roots of VentriJect. Like, we are a spin out of a university, and we should not forget that this, like, the whole idea is from some like scientific question that we asked ourselves, and we should also just try to still only use science to prove that question over and over again. Like, so I mean, we still try to be very open about our algorithm, how well it performs, and what data and bank of data it is based upon. Yeah,
that's good to know. Everything has been way too positive and optimistic so far, Kasper. So I'm sure the founding of VentriJect and the development of Seismofit has not been without challenge. We've all had challenges through our time. Perhaps you'd be happy to share what some of the key challenges have been throughout development of the company and the product.
Yeah, of course. And I think I've written down a few. Like, when we founded the company, as I said, the whole technology of using the seismocardiogram, even though I think it was first maybe the Russians who tried to use the seismocardiogram in space for the cosmonauts. Okay. Not a lot of people use the technology since then. So we developed a product that used a technology that hardly no one knew about. And we then gave back an estimate of VO2 max that at the time, not too many people were actually curious about. So I think it was a bit of a struggle in the beginning to actually convince people that there is actually a great value of knowing your patient's VO2 max. And I'll say that in the last 1.5, 2 years maybe, the longevity era is taken upon us, and like knowing your VO2 max is becoming more and more a regular thing. And that is, of course, for us extremely helpful when selling the product, but it also underlines the importance of the VO2 max and knowing it. So yeah, going to market with a product like this, with a tech no one knew much about, and a measure that at the time not a lot of people cared too much about, that has been a bit of a challenge. So that's also why in VentriJect we hired a CEO with a more commercial focus. Like the company was founded primarily by researchers and scientists, engineers, and we were not the best at actually selling the product. So we hired a CEO that was actually very good at selling the product and promoting the tech, which has been a good strategy for us. I can see that now.
It's quite funny. We've had lots of guests here, and we've always sat in a couple of different camps. The first camp is we actively hunt for opportunity and challenge in the market, and those opportunities and challenges lead to the creation of technology, which leads to the creation of businesses. We've then met founders who have developed something incredibly novel, IP rich, disruptive, and then they've sought out an opportunity or challenge within the marketplace to deploy their technology. I'm quite impressed by VentriJect, this was some really exciting academic research that, like you said, had maybe fallen out of fashion over the years. It had been explored previously, but not explored fully, and that interesting research has led to the development of a product. If the Seismofit is able to deliver comparable VO2 max than the traditional methods, which are challenging and intensive, and you get on a treadmill or a bike and you hit your threshold, then great, that's the market opportunity, right? Educate people on the importance of VO2 max and then get Seismofit on them and using it.
Yeah, and exactly as you say, like educating people, that is the, I mean, it's challenging, but it's also extremely interesting when you actually participate in those discussion with your customers, that there is actually great value in knowing this, and you can use this on your on a lot of subjects in a very short amount of time, and they don't need to get up on the bike and sweat. I mean, that in itself will exclude quite a lot of people from actually getting to know their VO2 max, which is important to know, right? That's what we have talked about. So yeah.
So I'm an investment guy. It's always been my interest to talk about funding and talk about the funding journey. We talked about the Tech Transfer Office and that this originated in academic research. Talk to us a little bit about the funding journey. Who got involved and when?
Yeah. So when we founded the company, we were actually quite a few co-founders. So at that first initial time, we all set aside money in the company. So the company was founded with our own money. And then one of the co-founders is extremely good at finding grant opportunities. So that's also what we did in the beginning. We found some good grant opportunities, and then from there on, we sought out investors in the market. And they were primarily investors that some other co-founders knew from before, but it was also some more official investment institutes in Denmark. At the time they were called Vækstfonden. I think now they're called IFO. So they also invested money in the company.
And how's it been as far as deploying that money? Have your investors been actively involved in supporting the development of the company? Are they sort of guiding the direction, or do you guys still retain a lot of autonomy?
I think it's actually a very good combination. So they, of course, some of them have positions in the board, and what we'll try to do is to actually find investors. I think you call it smart money, right? You want to find someone who actually knows a bit about the field that you're in, but who are also able to see your business from another perspective than what you do on a daily basis. So what we have gained is a lot of insights into both similar markets, but also just new perspectives on maybe some challenges that we have been dealing with. Like it has also opened up some opportunities. So these investors, they may know other people, and they can pitch us in, for instance, to new customers that we might have actually not reached out to yet. So I think investment-wise or investor-wise, we have been very fortunate. Also, like to get someone who actually could give us some very good input into how to approach this market.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I'm interested to know, because this product is a medical device, like you said, well, a medical device in Europe, a wellness product in the States.
Yeah.
What sort of investors are interested in this? Is this the fitness crowd? Is it people that deploy wellness technology in the fitness space? Is it a medical device investor? Who do you attract?
Yeah, it has actually not been any one of what you just said. So
Okay.
it has been more, different private investors, of course, also larger funds, but not necessarily some who were directly linked to the sports world or to fitness industry in general. No, so it's been a bit more broad, but someone with a lot of knowledge about like running, of course, the business, and also seeking different opportunities, like customer opportunities and market opportunities.
That's really interesting. Good to know. So a couple more questions. We talked a little bit about, I guess, alternative methods to measure CRF, cardiorespiratory fitness, and the current gold standard being, the CPET, the cardiopulmonary exercise training. What does the future of not just VO2 max, but general heart and lung health look like to a company like VentriJect? What are your predictions?
I mean, for us, we've seen this trend for the last 1.5 to 2 years, that there is a great interest in knowing your VO2 max. And we want to try and expand the use of Seismofit to not just be like your regular users without any known heart diseases, but to actually maybe also be included in a hospital facility. And in the hospital facility, we know people usually have a much worse condition than what we see in our current patients that we see it on, or that we use it on. So what we want to do is to expand the data set that we have in, for instance, patients with heart failure, to figure out if we can tune our algorithms to predict a VO2 max in these more ill people, subjects. And that is challenging, right? Because it's also very difficult to get a real good VO2 max reference values from these subjects, because they are very ill. None of them want to get up on a treadmill and do a CPET test. But nonetheless, the VO2 max value is still of great importance to know, especially if this is someone who maybe have to undergo surgery. It would be nice to know, hey, is your VO2 max maybe good enough to actually undergo surgery? So I think in the future, for us, it would be extremely nice that we could maybe be a pre-operative device as well, to be able to estimate VO2 max and give a doctor decision support about, is this subject or is this patient healthy enough to undergo surgery or not. That would be something that's, really cool in my opinion. It would, I think, actually bring a lot of value. It is also extremely difficult. So again, back to the science, right? We need some good clinical evidence that we can actually do this within a certain margin of error before we can launch such a product. Right now, I see like Seismofit just growing as a very accessible and a very scalable product to get your VO2 max estimate.
Absolutely. It's a very, very interesting deployment of the technology in a much needed area. I'm curious to know, Kasper, what is VentriJect got the potential to move to being a software company? Could the technology that you're building integrate with, say, an Apple Watch? Could it integrate with different existing platforms to give an all-in-one reading?
Yeah, we're definitely thinking about it. So what we do in our transitioning period from the MDD to the MDR, we are moving more and more of our medical device into the software. So the Seismofit, as we call it. This is the algorithm that actually is doing the signal processing and the estimation of the VO2 max. And this will be a software as a medical device. So in the future, you may be able to collect the data, not just from the Seismofit sensor, but from some other sensor. If, for instance, your phone can get a good enough seismocardiogram recording, right? Because the seismocardiogram is an accelerometer signal. So potentially you could record it from the phone as well, maybe even from a watch that's got an accelerometer in it. If the signal quality is good enough, you potentially could upload it to our estimation algorithm, to the Seismofit, and actually get your VO2 max estimate based off of that. So we are moving into that space as well. But as I said, it requires a signal that is good enough, of a high enough resolution to actually see all of these small fiducial points that we are looking for in the cardiac cycle to be able to estimate a accurate VO2 max.
I think that's a very, very exciting potential deployment of the technology down the line. And I think any potential investors would also be incredibly excited about that shift and the market opportunity. Hardware still has an absolute place, and standalone hardware still has an absolute place in the world of medical and also wellness and fitness. But we're always, one of the biggest tips I provide to people that I'm consulting with is look at opportunities to integrate and build partnerships with other platform providers. There's only enough wearables in the world before the human body is covered in different devices. Let's try and look at a future where we can integrate them into a couple of different devices. So it's good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
Final questions, Kasper. What are you most excited about right now? Not necessarily in the VO2 max space, but in general, what gets you excited as a biomedical engineer, as an academic researcher, as a CTO?
Yeah, it's actually still some of the things that led to founding VentriJect. So I think my supervisor at the time when I did the PhD, his name is Samuel Emil Smith, he said that one of his passions is the accessible diagnostics. And that I think encapsulates having this very complex, for instance, signal processing, making it accessible to a layman. I find that extremely fascinating. And when you can do that in a scalable way, as we are trying to do, but as so many others are also trying to do. And I think we see this more and more with the evolution of also AI, but also in general, just software being capable, or I would say maybe hardware driving the software being capable of so much more. Like the phones we have right now, they are extremely powerful. You can do so much on a very simple hardware platform, and that enables some, I think, extremely fascinating software solutions. And those are some of the things that I find extremely interesting, because you can make software algorithms that are very complex and you can run them on your phone. I find that like extremely fascinating, because it enables, again, scalability wise, a huge amount of people to use these extremely clever and intelligent algorithms. So I think that some of the things that I'm looking out for is these companies building scalable and accessible medical devices.
I couldn't agree more. And I read a very shocking statistic last week, I think put out by the NIHR, the National Institute of Health Research in the UK, that 80% of people in the UK have access to a smartphone now. And I think even global averages for access to a smartphone, not just in the developed world, but also in the developing world and low and middle income countries, is something like 47%, which is huge given population bases. So if you envision a future where smartphones are being used as diagnostic devices, you look at AI at the edge and removing clinical decision making and putting that in the hands of lay people, then brilliant. That's a future I think we can all get on board with.
I very much agree, Craig. That's a very good point.
Great stuff. Final question then, Kasper. one piece of advice, we get a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast. You've been through that journey yourself. Your route was through academia, but what tip would you provide to our listeners?
I think, and it's probably going to sound like a classic, but I think it would be something like go for it. Like if you have this good idea, it is extremely, or it can seem, it did to me, seem extremely scary to raise money, to go through all of the regulatory work, find investors, find customers, figure out your place on the market. But if you got a very good idea, and usually you got a good gut feeling, and if you got a good gut feeling, I think you should try to go for it. There is a lot of things that could scare you away, and that may also will scare a lot of people away. But I still think, like, if you got a good enough idea, try to go for it. When we did the first study in Aalborg University, I thought this is never going to work. Like Samuel, my supervisor, he pitched this idea, and I thought, okay, he's lost it. There's no way we're going to estimate VO2 max based on these squiggling lines that I see on my computer screen. And then fast forward, like, I think we did the study, and then maybe 6 months later, we were like, okay, this can actually work. And from there on, I think we just try to go with it. There's been a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of funding struggles, regulatory struggles, customer struggles. But in the end, now we can actually see a product that's got a good market fit, and that's like our customers are really adopting it. They look towards the Seismofit and see, okay, there is a potential for us to easily estimate VO2 max. And their customers, they are actually requesting it now. So, yeah. If we were scared away, we would never have been here.
That is the best advice I think I've heard yet, Kasper. Just do it.
Thank you so much, Craig.
Just do it. I think sometimes people are so constipated by pressure and stress, and sometimes you've just got to get out there and try something new. I'm not asking people to bankrupt themselves. I'm not advising people to take such massive risks that they mortgage their house and take out a huge loan, but you can start small, you can start gradual and build presence over time. So fantastic advice, Kasper.
Completely agree.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me, Kasper. Thanks everyone for listening in to the Medtech Ventures podcast, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for the next edition.